Hey guys, Joe Sidoti here. Thanks so much for stopping by for another video. This video, we are gonna talk about one tip that could literally make your mixes killer. Now, I know I did another video where I said this one thing. Well, really there's lots of one things, and it's a bunch of little things. And when you add them up, it makes for a huge difference. And that's what we're gonna talk about today. This one thing will literally make the bottom end in your mix killer. Now, I know I said it's a secret, and it's not really, but it might as well be, because I hardly see anybody actually using this very often anymore. So that's what we're gonna talk about today in this video. But first, before we dive in, I just wanted to say, make sure that you are visiting SidotiSound.com and going to the shop where you can get merchandise, you can get hats and hoodies and beanies and stickers. Okay, that helps support the channel. You can also download the multi-track files that go along with the Mix and Album series. If you haven't watched that, you've got to watch it. It's killer. It's not going to be on for much longer. It's so much killer content. It's 8 parts, and we mix 3 different songs from their entirety, from nothing to something, and then we master them together. This is an amazing tutorial series, and I don't want you to miss out on it. So, without further ado, let's dive in and talk about this one thing. All right, so I've got my notes here, and I just put down some notes because I want to make sure that I'm getting everything that went through my brain. So first thing is just to reiterate, the bottom end is one of the hardest things to get right in a mix. It can make or break your mix. It is what is mostly responsible for your mix translating, that and the mid-range. But I'm talking about the bass today. I'm talking about bottom end, kick drum, floor tom, bass guitar, synth bass, you name it, vocals, electric guitar. All of the stuff that's happening in the bottom end is really tough. And I've got a secret to share with you on how to fix that. Now, room acoustics play a vital role in getting the bottom end of your mix right. And if you don't have bass traps in the right spots and you don't have a nice, even response in your room, you're gonna be struggling. So I'm not saying that there's a way to get this perfect without acoustic treatment, but I am gonna share a way that really will help and get you a lot further than even with no treatment whatsoever. So if you haven't guessed it yet, I'm talking about the high pass filter. This thing is underused and underrated as far as I'm concerned from what I see on the internet. Now I want to talk about what the high pass does and how you really should be using it. Let's say you've got just a small amount of bottom end information that you don't really need, say like on an electric guitar, and then maybe on a vocal. And you figure, well, it's no big deal, it's really small. But once you got 48 tracks, 60 tracks, 100 tracks of that little amount, it adds up. Take that little amount, times it by 60, and that's a big problem. And that's why a lot of microphones have a roll-off switch. Maybe you've seen it. There's a flat line, right? Which means the response of the mic is as flat as the manufacturer could make it. And then there's a roll-off that says, hey, at this specific frequency, we're putting in a filter. It could be 80, it could be 300. You have to look at the manufacturer's specs on the mic, but if you don't even want to use a high pass filter, you could do it right at the mic, because the whole point is there's no sense in capturing information of an instrument that instrument doesn't put out. Does that make sense? Depending on what you're recording, that frequency range may not be necessary at all. I promise you, you don't need 50 hertz coming out of, say, an electric guitar. It's just ridiculous. And so you want to get rid of that, because again, that how many tracks times that, that's a lot of information that's building up and it's getting muddy. So maybe there's a question, what should you high pass and how high? Well, honestly, that depends, but I wrote down just some notes here that I'm gonna read. So one, bass guitar. Should you high pass bass guitar? Well, I mean, it's bottom end, it's gotta be there. Well, my answer is sometimes. It depends on the bass. Is it an active pickup or a passive pickup? Are they using a pedal? Is there an extra amount of harmonic bottom end, happening? That's gonna depend. What's the genre? Sometimes I won't high pass bass at all, but there's also, that's usually when there's hardly any like sub frequency range there anyways. Sometimes I'll high pass bass at 40 or 50 or 60 or 80. It really depends. And so that's just what I say. Bass guitar, sometimes. Next, kick drum. Well, you definitely shouldn't high pass a kick drum, right? Well, it depends. What mic are you using? How is the drum tuned? Is it giving you so much information down on the bottom end that it's just too muddy, too thumpy? Well then yeah, you should use a high pass filter. And so sometimes. Vocals, almost always, in my opinion, you should high pass vocals. I don't care if it's rap, rock, metal, country, it doesn't matter. The human voice can only reproduce to a certain frequency. And then you can add a little hype with the proximity effect of being close to the mic and get a little extra oomph out of it. But even then, you're not getting 60 hertz out of your vocal to push out, you know, like a kick drum would. So get rid of it, you don't need it. And let's say guitar, electric guitar, acoustic guitar. I would say almost always I high pass. Now, it depends. Again, how high? Is it 50, 60, 80, 100, 120? It depends on the instrument, the mic, the genre, but I almost always high pass electric guitars and vocals. It's just really important to get those vocals clean and clear. And when all that bottom end isn't building up, it can be so much cleaner, so much quicker. So rather than say, hey, I think you should high pass vocals at 140, I don't want to just put it in a box like that. What I want to talk about for a second is subwoofers. And if you don't have a subwoofer, first of all, you don't even know what's happening down there. So this is where, now hear me out, this is where your eyes become a great mixing tool as opposed to your ears. If you don't have speakers that reproduce 40, 50, 60, then how can you use your ears to judge it? You can't. You have to use meters and analyzers. And so this is where EQs with analyzers come in. You know what, let me show you an example of what I'm talking about on the analyzer built into the EQ. I've got several EQs that I use and they're analyzers built in. And I really think that is an awesome feature, especially when you're learning what frequencies sound like. Well, when you hear something you don't like and you see something that's really, you know, maybe a big amplitude of that, then you start to memorize, when I'm hearing this, it's that frequency range. And that's one of the beauties about using an analyzer, especially when you're learning how to EQ. So let me show you what I'm talking about here in Pro Tools. I'm gonna bring up my Softube on this electric guitar. And again, you're not gonna hear anything, so there's nothing wrong with the video. Let's just press play and see what the analyzer is showing us. So there's our electric guitar. It starts to really, here I'll turn the EQ on so that goes away. It starts to really fall off right at 100 and come down here. Now, again, I really recommend you've got to actually use your ears as well. But I know without even listening that I could do a high pass filter or a low cut, which is what this calls it, right at about 100, maybe even higher. See how I'm just following the curve of what the guitar is naturally falling off at anyways? So what's the point? It's naturally falling off there anyways. Well, I'll show you. The point is this information right here. Do you see my mouse? This information, that's what I'm talking about. That's 50 hertz, 40, 30, times however many tracks you have built up. That is the junk that we're gonna be getting rid of. And you certainly can't hear that if you don't have subwoofers or speakers that can reproduce those frequencies. Or your acoustics are so bad, you think that you're not hearing it, but you are actually, or you think that you are hearing it, but you're not. It can really mess with you. So this is where your eyes play a huge part in that. All right, cool. I hope that makes sense of what I'm talking about. Okay, what if you don't have an EQ plugin with an analyzer? Let's just say for argument's sake you don't. Now, I'm gonna tell you something that's kind of a workaround. It's a little unorthodox, but just follow me for a second. Here's what I would suggest if you don't have an analyzer and you don't have a subwoofer to hear what's going on down there. Then this is what I suggest. Put a high pass filter. Let's use the guitar as an example, the electric guitar. Put the high pass filter on it and start bringing the high pass filter up until you notice the high pass filter doing something. Okay, now you've reached not only maybe in the range of your speakers, but you've also reached above the lowest fundamental of the guitar. So as you brought that high pass filter up and you go, oh, I hear it, the guitar's got thinner. Now I know this isn't scientific, so just please bear with me, but I mean, you could at least try it. Once you've gotten into that range where you hear it, back it off a little bit. Then bypass the high pass filter and unbypass the high pass filter. If you don't hear a difference, but it's in and it's at 120, I promise you, let's just say it was at 120, you have corrected something, you just can't hear it. But you at least know with your ears that you didn't thin it out too much, you didn't jack up the sound. Does that make sense? When you do this more and more, you know, over the years, as you get better at this, you're gonna start to make like a memory. It's almost like muscle memory of just knowing what frequency ranges you can safely high pass at depending on the track and the instrument. You know, I know that I can go, I'm not even gonna say a number because I don't want you to quote me on it, but I can go right about here every time with an electric guitar, and I know that I'm totally safe. I'm not thinning it out, but I'm getting rid of mud I don't need. Same thing on vocals, bass guitar even. It doesn't matter. You will get to know the ranges that these things typically want to live in. But I promise you, if you're cleaning up 30, 40, 50, 60 tracks of junk that you don't need, I promise you, the things that you do want to be down there, they're gonna have so much more headroom. Your speakers are gonna be able to handle it. You're not gonna have all that extra crud, you know, rolling around in your room. Your kick drum, your floor tom, maybe your bass guitar. Those are the only 3 or 4 things, you know, floor tom, whatever, I think I said that are gonna be there, and let them have all the presence and give it space. Let there be room for those few things by getting rid of things that you don't need to be there. I'm not a big fan, this is a side note, I'm not a big fan of, well, I'm gonna pull a little 100 out of my bass and add a little 100 in my kick, and that way, you know, I'm creating a hole for this and then making a spot for that. I just don't think it that way. I just think of, this is how I want my bass to sound. This is how I want my kick drum to sound. When the two come together, if it's too muddy, if it's too boomy, I pick which one do I want to have the most information, let's say below 80. Do I want my kick drum to just be mostly attack and not very boomy, but I want my bass guitar to be really low? Well, then I'll choose the bass. If I want my kick drum to really push air and I want my bass guitar to drive, well, then I high pass the bass and I let the kick be down there. So I don't even have to worry about some of that overlapping, you know, if you're using the high pass filter. So that is the one thing that can give you a killer mix in the bottom end. It's getting rid of junk, getting rid of mud. I hope this video helped you. I hope that you enjoyed it. Please subscribe to the channel if you're not already, like the video, and make sure to check out SidotiSound.com for more information. All right, thanks guys.